Hello again, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV and the final show of this week. And it is continuing our theme of random subjects. Essentially, we've covered quite a few things over the last few days and weeks. And the Dieppe show yesterday was absolutely mind-blowing. I was exhausted afterwards, but thank you very much for watching it. It's been very well viewed, very well received. That was great. But today, we're kind of going off to Hollywood via Vienna, via Torpedoes and Bluetooth. So we are talking about the Hollywood actress Hedy Lamarr. And I was just saying to my guest, who I will introduce you to very shortly, we've covered quite a few different women on our channel over the months, but often it's been by units, so the postal unit or secret agents. We've never done a show about a female who has as many strings to her bow as Hedy Lamarr. It's a delight to bring it to you. So my guest today, Heather Massie, is an actress, a writer, and she performs a show as Hedy Lamarr, and we are delighted to have her with us. So good afternoon, Heather. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Delighted to be here with you.
Well, I mean, so you're my first person who's actually has a show about the person or the subject they're interested in. I've had people who've written books, I've had people who've made films, but doing a show about someone is a new to me. So my first question, obviously, is how did you discover the story of Hedy Lamarr, and what drew you to wanting to create a show about her?
What drew me to her? Well, I was looking for a woman in science to feature in a solo show. I had been in the sciences before I became an actor. I was studying astrophysics and ended up with a degree in theater arts and wanted to find a way to bring science back into my life and into my work because I had put it away in a box. And so I decided, one, I wanted to create a solo show because I wanted something that I could take all over the world. I always wanted to do an international tour, and a solo play is the most portable. So I was looking for a woman in science to feature, and Hedy came up as a possibility, and she was the front runner from the time that I learned her story.
Well, that's a nice answer. And we were talking when we did our pre-chat a few days ago about the means of bringing information to people through mediums beyond just books, and such as comic books and plays and films and songs. And just yesterday I was reading about the German heavy metal group Sabaton, who do they do songs. One is about Audie Murphy in World War II and how they're bringing history via the medium of heavy metal, which is exciting and intriguing. And so for you, as we were discussing, when you do your show, you are performing to people who have an interest in Hollywood glamour, they have an interest in movie history and science and history. So you're kind of hitting a lot of subjects in one show. So that must be a broad appeal for you.
Her story has such a broad appeal. Young women, old people who lived through World War II. And I have a photo of a 96-year-old World War II veteran coming up who saw the show, and all the way down to primary schools. I go in and do presentations about Hedy, and do performances for I usually say 12 to 100 plus. So there are just so many interest groups, and especially because one of the main missions of my work is to encourage young women in science and technology.
And that is great. That's when we have people on our shows, people like Jenny Grant, who's trying to get women involved in studying history. And as we've talked about numerous times, the gatekeepers of military history are middle-aged white guys, and they don't always want to let the younger people of different genders and colors come into the realm. But it's important that we learn these things. So before we get into your PowerPoint and your presentation, I wanted to ask a little bit about how you research someone like Hedy Lamarr, because when we get into the 1940s and people who lived in Hollywood, there's a lot of publicity about them that isn't necessarily true, because the studio system are creating lives. I mean, for example, a few years later, no one knew Rock Hudson was gay, and they manufactured his girlfriend's. When I have military historians on about going into archives, how do you research someone who already, as an actor, lives behind some kind of veil of pretend and secrecy?
Yeah. Well, I would say one of the main things that was secret about her was that she was Jewish. It was something she almost hid from herself, it seems. But I mean, it wasn't a safe thing to be in Europe at the time. And And also once she got to Hollywood, Louis B. Mayer, even though he was Jewish, he did not let his players speak of religion. So that was one thing that I had to really contemplate how she might have been feeling without it being something that she shared with the world or even her own family. But in terms of research, I really focused on, there are two books that I really used a lot. This is, Hedy's Valley by Richard Rhodes. It's a really lovely book, and he is an incredible gentleman. He's been quite a support of my work. And then also my dear friend, Stephen Michael Shear. There we go. Yep. Beautiful, The Life of Hedy Lamarr. He is just a dear sir, and even autographed my book. They're quite those were the two that I used the most. There are quite a few others. I don't have all of them with me, but of her filmography, The Films of Hedy Lamarr by Christopher Young. And then I also, a lot of books have come out since the time that I did my premiered my show in 2016. And I got to meet Lori Walmark, who came to see my show, Hedy Lamarr's Double Life. This is a great book for the younger readers. So yeah, I mean, these and every book that I could get my hands on that existed at the time, every movie that I could find of hers that I could watch so I could see her on film, but also really any video that I could find of her where she was herself. Then I pulled for those things as well, because I felt that those were important things to pull from, because that was her as herself and not as a character. And I really marked all the things that I found interesting and intriguing and ridiculous and ironic, funny. She had a great sense of humor, and I pull all those things and wove them into the story. And also, whenever I could bring in other characters, I do. So I play a total of about 36 different people, primarily Hedy. And the most important relationship in the play is Hedy's relationship with the audience. And but I think it's fun to have the story happen in real time and have the audience be able to see these other characters. And so I just wove all those things together, and luckily all the things I found interesting and funny and ironic or stupid or were all the things that the audience seems to react to. So I get to do all the things that I find fun. I get to be a leading lady, the leading lady of leading ladies, right? And be a character actor at the same time. And that rarely happens for a female performer. Mm. So it was something that I created, and for all the things that I love to do. And it keeps it alive for me, and each performance is new because each audience is new.
Brilliant stuff. And that, of course, brings us into the sense of the subject, the fact that it's easier now for someone like yourself to label yourself as a writer and a performer and go on podcasts and YouTube shows and things like that. Hedy was at her peak in an era when people liked everyone in a box and don't get out of the box. So exactly. You are an actress, or you're a scientist, or you're Amelia Earhart and you fly aircraft, or you're a business woman and you do that. But being more than one thing, particularly for a female, really wasn't possible back then. So how we'll get into your presentation, but how do you think someone like Hedy managed to kind of compartmentalize her life during an era when she has to go and be the Hollywood queen on certain days, and the other days she's busy kind of at a drawing board thinking about science? It must have been a very complicated life.
Sometimes she did it on the same day. She would be out shooting a film and be at home at her drafting table or with her research texts, inventing. She was a lot of different things, and I mean, you can debate how successful she was in that. I feel like she was very successful in many ways, but she had to navigate the misogyny and the boxes that she was put in. She said her face was a mask that she couldn't remove. It was a curse. Being a mask she couldn't remove because people didn't see beyond that a lot of times. But she was a very successful performer, a very great negotiator. She got an unheard of contract out of Louis B. Mayer after walking out on his first offer. and she didn't take crap. She would go to court if she felt that there was something that was unjust. She and Betty Davis had the studios and the courts quite a bit over contracts, and she and Betty were two of the very first women to produce their own films. She broke with MGM, and she produced several of her own films. And I mean, and on the side, she's inventing. She didn't listen to society saying you can't do both things. You can't be smart if you're beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It seems to me she was as successful as she could be within the constraints of the era she lived in. And had she been around today, she would have blossomed even more in different areas. But back at the time, she pushed it as far as she could. But there were these ceilings of limitation that you just had, which will come up in the show when we talk about her inventions.
Exactly. I'll definitely be addressing that.
So it's up to you. If you want to start, you get your PowerPoint ready. I'm gonna put it on mic because Heather has to get is doing her own screen sharing today. So Heather's going to get ready for that, and I'm going to carry on talking. Well, are we ready to do that, Heather? Now, are we going to do that now? Yep.
I'm working on it.
Good. So it's good for me, folks, because I'm not doing the PowerPoint tonight. I've got a night off. Heather's doing her own work tonight, so I've just got to butt in and ask questions. What we're going to do is when Heather's got it ready, we'll do the presentation. It'll be sort of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. And then after that, we'll have an open forum chat again. And if you've got questions, folks, you can launch them in and we'll talk about that. But Heather's prepared this presentation, so we'll go with that. So, and while the presentation's going, Heather can't see me because of the way her screens work, but I think we're ready now. So there we are.
Yeah.
So good. So we're going to be talking about Hedy and her invention. So I'll hand over to you, and if I feel I need to ask anything to clarify, I will. But we'll let you do the presentation, and over to you.
Okay, great. So you're seeing the slide the way you should be seeing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything's perfect.
Information there. All right, so thank you so much, Paul. Yes, again, my name is Heather Massie. I'm so honored to be here with you today on World War II TV to tell you about the amazing Hedy Lamarr, the actress and inventor of frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, and about my play on Hedy titled Hedy, the Life and Inventions of Hedy Lamarr. So I researched, wrote, produced, and performed the show in the United States and around the world because I have a passion for science. I studied, as I said, astrophysics at the University of Virginia with dreams of becoming an astronaut, and ended up with a degree in theater arts from the Virginia Tech School of the Arts. So now I've found a way to marry my love of art with my love of science and the subject of Hedy Lamarr by celebrating her unexpected genius. You can see me here in my high school years in the observatory at Virginia Tech working on my science forum project on astrophotography. In terms of Hedy, here is one of the very many iconic images of her. Most people, a lot of our viewers probably accepted, are less familiar with Hedy as an inventor, and most people know her only as the face that graced the silver screen, but that's changing. This is how I describe her for my show. Hedy Lamarr, glamorous siren of the silver screen, was more than the most beautiful woman in the world. She invented frequency hopping spread spectrum technology that makes the world of wireless communication tick. From Austria to Hollywood, World War II, Torpedoes, Ecstasy, and Intrigue, to the very cell phone in your pocket, Hedy Lamarr is there. There was much more going on inside Hedy's brain than anyone was giving her credit for at the time. Most people, like I said, know much less about her as an inventor. But now I'm going to share just a tiny bit of the show, a scene of me as Hedy from the show. So let me get that going for you.
And in all my movies, a great deal of me is immortalized on the silver screen. All of me, in fact. I have been called glamorous, the most beautiful woman in the world. But there is no secret to glamour. Now, any girl can be glamorous. All that you must do is to stand still and look stupid. That's all there is. You should try it sometime. You think I'm kidding? Due to the expectation that a beautiful woman must be stupid, it was never understood that I have the ability to think.
So that was Hedy's predicament. And she did. That was one of her most famous quotes. Any girl can be glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid. Because, it didn't take her intellect for a lot of the work she was doing. But to understand her story, we must go to the beginning. She is born Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler on November 9, 1914. She has a very inquisitive nature. She likes to take things apart and put them back together to figure out how they work. And one such important item that I think is important is a music box that she took apart and put that back together when she was 5 years old. And I think that's really prophetic in terms of what she was able to do in her most important invention. Somehow, it's this bright-eyed little girl is destined to become the inventor of the secret communication system and frequency hopping spread spectrum technology. From her mind will come technology which fuels today's wireless communication revolution: wireless internet, GPS, Bluetooth, cell phones, the Milstar system of military satellites, mobile healthcare systems, barcode scanning, cordless telephones, CDMA, drones, and so much more. It was her father, Emil Kiesler, who encouraged her inquisitive nature by taking her on walks all over Europe and explaining how everything works. At the time, Hedy is also fascinated by the stage. She becomes an actress on stage, studying with and performing for director Max Reinhardt, as well as acting on screen. She performs in Austria, Germany, and Czechoslovakia. And her most famous or most infamous film was called Ecstasy. It was a Czech art film. And it had been called Symphony of Love, but got renamed Ecstasy due to her depicting the first female orgasm in legitimate film. So it was caused quite a controversy. It was banned in many places, and including by Hitler, not because of the risque nature, but because she was Jewish. Now after Ecstasy, she's on stage, and this gentleman, Fritz Mondel, sees her on stage and falls in love with her, and he becomes the first of her 6 husbands. He is an Austrian munitions dealer who manufactures weapons and sells them to the world leaders. He is owner of Hartenberger Petroleum Industries. He is very possessive. He's jealous over the film Ecstasy. He tries to buy up all the copies and the negatives of the film, but that just means they make more. He also doesn't allow Hedy to act, which is heartbreaking for her. But while in attendance at many dinner parties for prospective buyers of munitions, Hedy absorbs a great deal of knowledge about munitions. And with Mondel selling to the likes of Mussolini and Hitler, it must be difficult for Hedy because she is of Jewish heritage. With the overwhelming possessiveness of her husband and with war looming, she can tell the handwriting is on the wall overhearing these conversations. So she decides to make a fantastic escape from Austria. And after she makes it to London, she meets the film producer, Louis B. Mayer. And like I said, she walks out on his first crappy offer. And what she does is she arranges to sail on the Normandy, which is the same ship as Mayer, on his return voyage. And she parades herself on deck, demonstrates how much attention that she can garner. And she then arrives in America with an unheard of contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and her new name, Hedy Lamarr. She stars with many of the greats, including Charles Boyer and Spencer Tracy and William Powell and Mr. Clark Gable, Mr. Bob Hope, and her very favorite co-star, Mr. Jimmy Stewart. And I love playing Jimmy in the show. Here she is in her most triumphant role as Delilah in Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah with Victor Mature. But Hedy, and you can see how absolutely gorgeous she was. But,
there's no denying it, yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Absolutely.
She's stunning. but she does find herself to be very unsatisfied with a life of Hollywood parties, and she prefers an evening with a group of friends in intellectual conversation, or an evening at home with her research texts and her design materials, creating inventions at her drafting table. And it's important to note that she left school when she was 16 or 17. She wasn't formally educated, but she knew how to learn. And that's what she had: research text. She wanted to know something, she would learn it. She had an idea, she would figure out how to make it happen. So during the war, the torpedo is key to her invention. She's pained by hearing that children are being killed by torpedoes while being shipped to safety during the war. And so she calls on her knowledge of munitions from Mondel's dinner parties to create a communication system for torpedoes, which would be unjammable, so that the Allied forces would have a power greater than that of Hitler and the Axis forces. So Hedy's idea is to use radio frequencies for torpedo guidance in a new way. At that time, there were only 18 frequencies employed, and only one was employed for each device when it was using radio for guidance, and that could be easily detected and listened to and intercepted and by the enemy, and they could misdirect the torpedo from its target. So her idea is to use multiple frequencies and frequency hop between many different frequencies quickly. So to brainstorm how to implement her idea, she takes on an unlikely co-inventor, the jack of all trades and avant-garde composer George Antheil, best known for Ballet Mécanique, which is a composition in which he worked to synchronize 16 player pianos. And this is key to their invention. So a player piano is a self-playing piano that works a bit like the music box that she took apart when she was 5. So the music box mechanism works by turning a cylinder with spikes on it to strike different notes to play a song. And player piano works in a similar way with a paper roll that goes through the piano to communicate which notes, which musical frequencies to use to play a song. And you can see the punched holes here in this paper roll. So as they were playing piano together and changing keys, it dawned on them to develop the mechanism with the idea of placing 2 matching devices, like miniature piano rolls, one in the torpedo and one in the guiding vessel. So the devices would have matching sets of frequencies like the piano roll and be able to communicate while at the same time being immune to enemy interference. This way, the devices would hop frequencies simultaneously and be able to communicate accurately while being virtually undetectable by the enemy. Even if the signal is detected only in a tiny piece, and only a tiny piece will get through, because they'll only be on each frequency for a very short period of time. And they also used they employed the use of bits of false information to confuse anyone who might hear any of the communication. So what they would get might be a mix of true pieces and false pieces. So their patent, here's an image of that. On August 11, 1942, they received their patent for the secret communication system. To support Hedy's new country, they give the patent to the US Navy. And we'll talk more about this. I'm sure you'll have some questions, but the idea proves ahead of its time, and the Navy neglects its value and shelves it for decades, and tells Hedy instead to sell war bonds, which she does. She sells, in one evening, she sold about $7 million in bonds and a total of $25 million in bonds. She would sell kisses for $25,000 each. So she knew how to use a male pride to her advantage and turn, and okay, you're going to make me do this? I'll show you I can do this. And she did. And she also worked at the Hollywood canteen to support the morale of the GIs. And that's where she meets her third husband, John Loder, introduced to her by Bette Davis, with whom she has 2 children. And she also had an adopted son from her second marriage to Jean Markey, and they were estranged at a certain point and reconnected later in life. So she breaks with MGM. She breaks her contract and is a pioneer, as I said, being one of the first women to produce her own films, which were The Strange Woman and Dishonored Lady and an epic film that she did in Europe that she didn't get distribution for here called The Loves of Three Queens. In terms of her patent, it is finally employed in the late 50s for a sonobuoy system. And then in 1962, when it is key in averting the escalation of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And now it's used in the great majority of wireless systems, which are key to our everyday lives after it was declassified in 1985. So Hedy continued designing inventions the rest of her life. However, she was much more secretive about them. She and George also designed an anti-aircraft device using magnetism. However, it was superseded by another technology. In terms of frequency hopping, it is not until 55 years after the patent of the secret communication system. In 1997, it's only in 1997 then when Hedy receives her first recognition, when the Electronic Frontier Foundation calls to award her with a Pioneer Award for her patent, to which she famously responds, "It's about time." Yeah, that's a quote. So she is the first woman ever to receive the Bowlby Prize for invention. In 1998, she is awarded the Victor Kaplan Medal of the Austrian Association of Patent Holders and Inventors. And she and George are posthumously inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame. Her birth date, November 9th, is now Inventors Day in many European countries, and the Hedy Lamarr Prize for Invention is awarded each year in Vienna to an outstanding woman inventor. Hedy is also the inspiration for the character of Catwoman and for the creation of the Disney's character of Snow White. You can definitely see the resemblance.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of times when arts teams are building new characters, they base them on actual people. And in this case, it was Hedy Lamarr. So I believe that Hedy's story must be told, which is why I have dedicated myself to telling it. Here I appear as Hedy. My mission is to ensure that the first things that people will think of when they hear the name Hedy Lamarr are intelligence, ingenuity, and invention. I'm working to inspire audiences to find ways each day to make the world a better place, and especially to encourage young women in the pursuit of science and technology. Endeavors of science and technology study, projects, any kinds of ways that I can encourage them in these realms. So I've had a really wonderful, I've been performing it for about 4.5 years, a little less during COVID, but I've been to at least 12 of the United States, also Ireland, Northern Ireland, Italy, Sweden, Ukraine, most recently to Iceland, Reykjavik, and also work in Zimbabwe and South Africa, where I've done my most performance of the show outside of the United States. And I'll highlight a few of those, including here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans.
Yay, New Orleans, yeah.
We
love the World War II Museum.
Yes, of course, because it started out as the D-Day Museum and then transformed into the National World War II Museum. And the really lovely thing is that I got to perform in BB's Stage Door Canteen, and which is lovely since Hedy worked at the Hollywood Canteen. And here's my gentleman that I talked to you about. He attended one of the performances. It was this past May, rescheduled from last year. And it was on his 96th birthday. As World War II veteran, spent his, celebrated his birthday with his family by seeing the show, which is quite an honor. And here I was in Reykjavik in Iceland this past July. And here in 2018 with the InspireFest Technology Conference in Dublin, Ireland, in their beautiful Bord Gáis Energy Theater. And aboard the USS Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum in New York City, I performed for the Goals for Girls program. Here I am in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe with my favorite audience member at the Ntwasa Arts Festival, and then the next year at the Harare International Festival of the Arts in Harare, Zimbabwe. And like I said, I've been in South Africa quite a few times, including 2019 as a Fulbright specialist. So here you see my youngest audience members at the Cape Town Science Center. And here I am in Richards Bay with the girls of I Am Science and St. Catherine Girls High School and Lamula Primary School students. They are both in KwaZulu-Natal province. And these are some dear ones who are just dear to my heart. One of the best day of my life, I would say, even though I had a broken foot. And the girl right next to me wants to be a doctor, so I think the world of her. Was also at the University of Zululand in the Department of Creative Arts, and then quite a few also universities in the States. Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, Millersville University, Champlain College, Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, Eastern Illinois University. And I do a lot of outreach when I travel, included class visits, master classes, and workshops. These are artists in Khayelitsha outside of Cape Town. They live in a shack town, and they are in an arts program started by the man in the center, Mendisi Sindo. I'm honored that the show has received 19 awards from performances throughout the US and around the world. I take the show to theaters, arts festivals, science festivals, museums, universities, schools, science centers, STEM and STEAM events, Jewish organizations, technology conferences, and more. And I'm just also honored that it has received overwhelmingly positive critical acclaim. And I say that that's a testament to the strength of Hedy's story, that the show has proven successful for audiences from youth through the generations, all the way up to my dear 96-year-old World War II veteran. So you can learn more about where the show will be at my website, heathermassie.com/Hedy, or just heathermassie.com. That works too, MASSIE. I'll be coming up in Maryland, Vermont, Arizona, New York, Italy. I'm crossing my fingers on everything happening. But yeah, my email, my phone number, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any way you want to learn more about the show. And anyone that has ideas of new places and organizations to include in upcoming tours, definitely reach out to me directly. My best source of ideas are people who learn about her story. So
absolutely, and as usual, folks, all the links in the description below, so you can make contact with Heather. So I mean, well done. Resound. If World War II TV gave awards, I'd be giving them out as well. So but I haven't given them out yet. So I mean, the point is, as we talked about, you can take your show literally anywhere, from science museums to stage door canteens to history clubs. I mean, there's literally anywhere it could go. So it's amazing. Are we finished with the PowerPoint now? I think we are, aren't we?
Yes. I'll stop the.
There we go. We got that back. We're gone now. Yeah. So
all right, got it.
Brilliant stuff. So we'll go back and recap and go through some of the questions, and the points I wanted to make, because I think it's a fascinating story. The first thing that strikes me when you're doing your show is the motivation for wanting to do her science, particularly you said about the ships being sunk and children being killed, because we do know when it comes to World War II and some of the inventions made, some of the scientists, it was all about the love of science more than it necessarily was a motivation for a particular country, and then every country was working on what eventually became the atomic bomb, and there was lots of shared science in the 1930s. And we talked, you and I, before we went live a couple of days ago, about she has been in the Third Reich. She has seen, you said it there, the writing on the wall of what's happening. She may or may not have met Mussolini and Hitler personally. She certainly knows people who know them.
Yeah. Well, her best friend Arlene said that it was having Mussolini and Hitler there, and really her realizing through those conversations that the war was coming and that she needed to get out.
Because this is what that leads up to the fact that it's uncomfortable for some Americans to accept the fact that when you get to 1939, 1940, although a lot of Americans are keen on trying to get involved and help out Europe, there are also equally lots of Americans who are just like, not our problem, not our fight, let's not get involved, isolationist. And the weird thing about Hollywood at the time is, you said it yourself, is that so many people within Hollywood were immigrants. They had come from Europe. They'd come from, even some of the most famous Americans weren't actually American. Errol Flynn was Tasmanian, for example.
We all came from somewhere else.
Yeah. So in that environment, you've got people who have experienced what's happening within Germany and Austria.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that about how her motivation was not just, she clearly loved problem solving, but she wanted a problem solved for the right cause. And I think that's essential to understand. Exactly. Did she ever write anything down about, you said in your research about her motivation for the science?
The only thing I know of is that it was the motivation for the science.
Well, yes, for doing things for the war effort. Did you guys kind of put it, articulate?
Well, I know specifically what she did say that hearing of the children who were killed by torpedoes. Well, they would be being taken out of the dangerous city to be shipped to somewhere safer, and then on the way, they would often die. But also, torpedoes were notoriously inaccurate. Ours were about 60% of duds. So she really, obviously she had this knowledge, and she knew she could do something better with it. In terms of what she might have been feeling through all this, she came here in 1937. And on her birthday, the following year, was Kristallnacht. It started November 9th, 1938. So I imagine that would have had an effect on her. And she and George worked on this for quite some time and submitted the patent for approval in 1941. And then it was approved August 11, 1942. So between those two dates was Pearl Harbor, which means, they were doing all this before the U.S. was involved. So, her thoughts were outside of just...
Her thoughts were globally rather than within the USA.
Yeah.
So, and that's fascinating. And also the other thing is, when she and George took the invention off and offered it to people, because didn't it end up being kind of seized because she was an alien? And what's the story behind that? Or is that a bit of a myth?
Well, she did receive a notice that this was the property of an enemy alien herself. So she does this amazing thing, gives this patent that's worth billions and billions of dollars away, never gets compensation for it, and then she's called an enemy alien. But they'll certainly take the money that she raises for war bonds. So it was wounding, I think, to her, and insulting, to say the least. That was the response that she got. She wasn't yet a citizen. She became a citizen, I believe, in the 50s. But yeah, before all this, she was considering quitting MGM and going to DC to offer her services to the newly established Inventors Council. So yeah, she was going to stop her acting in order to be able to provide information that she had. But, even with the patent, now we get to, they dismiss it. Various different reasons why, some of which we probably don't know, because those might still be classified, but it was labeled top secret, but the Navy didn't employ it. Hedy and George, part of the explanation of it, they said that it works in a manner like the device in a player piano. And so instead of the Navymen recognizing that the device could be put inside a wristwatch size, they thought, well, how can you put a player piano inside a torpedo? Well, that wasn't the idea. And also they would think a Hollywood film star and a composer, what would they know about this? What could
Well,
they
this is the thing I'm getting to. This idea of, it's not the idea, it's who presents the idea, isn't it? It's like in the sales world, in that if you are a big respected antique dealer that has a big shop in the middle of a very posh street in London, you can sell something for much more money than someone selling it on a stall in a bric-a-brac market, because it's where it's being presented from. It has
Right.
credibility because of the
Right.
source, and there's there's a musician, composer, and not just a Hollywood actress, a very, very glamorous,
Right.
who has been almost pigeonholed into these kind of on a gentleman's arm kind of roles.
Right.
I mean, she took on powerful roles as well, but there were many strong roles.
Casting. They didn't know what to do with her. She just got the beautiful woman, the other woman kind of roles.
And you wonder whether, if her and George had just sort of bought some drinks for some young lieutenant commander in a bar somewhere and said, go in with this idea, and someone had gone in there in a uniform and presented the idea, whether they'd have looked up from their desk better and paid more attention. I mean, it's all what ifs.
But at the same time, in that instance, usually then the person presenting it gets credit for having done it. I mean, that happens to women all the time. Luckily in this, I mean, George was her co-inventor, but even he said, it was her idea. But one thing is that to kind of mask it from being Hedy Lamarr, she put her married name, Hedy Lamarr, on the patent instead of Hedy Lamarr. But it was still obviously a woman's name. And I really feel like if it had been used and they had gotten recognition, and I mean, technically they should have gotten payment because it was employed while it was still under patent in 1959, then I feel like she would have done a lot more. The things that she did, she was more secretive about. She was working on modifications of the Concorde aircraft. She worked on an improved traffic light system. She worked on a device to help, well, in her latter years were things that made sense for her age. So she was working on a device to help disabled people in and out of the bath safely. And she also devised a device for the disposal of used Kleenex.
Wow.
And her best friend said that she would use that. She would have it around the house all the time. Yeah.
I mean, when you said she left school at 16, and she's English isn't obviously a natural language. When do you think she realized that her ideas had merit? Because lots of people scribble away in their rooms on nonsensical stuff that's just meaningless.
I think she knew that they had merit. I just think she said that ideas came to her easily. And I believe she knew they had merit.
But how would she? I mean, I'm sure she did. But how would you measure? When she was a young lady, she must have gone through her ideas herself and worked them out and go, okay, this makes sense. But someone at some point must have said to her, "You're onto something there." She must have got the confidence from somewhere. That I'm wondering whether there isn't some kind of.
To get it from somewhere else. I think she got.
I don't know.
I think she got it from her father when she was young. She adored him, and he died before she left Vienna. She adored him, and he would teach her how a streetcar works or how a printing press works. In the show, I created a scene where he describes how a steam engine works, and so I really, if the confidence had to come from somewhere, I believe it came from him. She just thought logically about how, okay, this is how this works now. How could it be better? There's this problem. How can it be fixed to address this problem? For example, she dated Howard Hughes for a time, one of the many people who dated him, and it wasn't because he was a grand lover. It was because they liked to discuss ideas, and she knew that he was working to create the fastest aircraft. And she said, why would the wings be square? And she did the logical thing. She went out and bought a book on fish, and she bought a book on birds, found the fastest fish, found the fastest bird, created an aircraft design using those shapes, and that swept wing. Swept wing aircraft. So, I mean, that's why wouldn't you think of the most aerodynamic existence?
It seems to me the very fact she hadn't had a formal formal education in science like you yourself have, is that she had this ability to just She didn't have to follow a set of railway lines. There wasn't an approach to it that she wouldn't have considered herself, well, I've got to stick to physics, or I've got to stick to the steam engine. She was just ideas machine.
Yeah. So, I mean, with the torpedo, radio guidance is not secure. How do we make it secure? Well, we changed the frequencies. And they used, in honor of the number of keys on the keyboard, they used 88 frequencies in the secret communication system. So that was a nod to the piano.
I mean, it's when we analyze it, it's extraordinary how brilliant she was, and as we've established, and you brilliantly said, just underappreciated during her time, because you can't imagine if you'd been outside one of those packed theaters for one of the premieres of her movies, and you went out there with a microphone and said, so who's in this movie, and so who's and what's Hedy Lamarr known for? No one's going to say, oh, well, she sits by her drawing board night after night coming up with things. They would just say, oh, she's lovely. That would be.
Oh yeah, and for the Bonn rallies, like thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people would show up to the Bonn rallies, and even the women would be fainting.
Wow.
Because they were just so, I mean, she was so widely known at the time. She was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. And that, that's a blessing and a curse as well, to be known as that.
And yet she did the war bonds drive. She did the $25,000 kisses. I mean, I'm speculating, but part of her must have hated that, the kind of the meat parade aspect of it. But
I'm sure she did.
Proud of how much money she could raise. I mean, it's the positive of the war effort, but it's a strange thing to do for someone who's so bright.
Yeah, but she knew that was the way to get the higher dollars. I mean, she was smart. She's like, okay, you want me to do that? I'll do it, and I'll do it well.
So it's on her terms. It's not being. She's doing it on her terms to raise money. I mean, it's a fascinating. It really is a fascinating story. Yeah. I mean, sorry.
And then at the Hollywood canteen, at first she thought she wouldn't be able to dance with the GIs, that she felt like she needed to care for a man to dance with them, but it ended up being enjoyable for her to do that. And I put a scene in the show as an homage to my friend, playwright, Mr. Leslie Lee. He's the reason I first went to Zimbabwe. And he's since passed away, and he had written a show for me about a woman in Assumption, Nebraska, whose boyfriend goes off to the war. And he ends up getting killed. But so I took that character of Kurt and put him in the Hollywood canteen. And sorry, it gets me choked up because it's my friend Leslie. So I put June's boyfriend Kurt in the canteen, and he dances with Hedy Lamarr.
Wow, how lovely! Yeah. I mean, what I'm thinking about now is how weirdly, if she was to come back to life now and look on the internet today and like superstars supposedly do, they look themselves up on Google. That's what I've done it. See what there is about me. Not very much, but she would probably be absolutely bowled over now by the fact that probably her inventions would come up first now, because there's an entire generation or two of people who wouldn't even have heard of her as an actress now. I mean, believe it or not, I was talking to someone the other day. It was Alan Allport, who's about, he teaches in New York. He's a British historian living in New York, and how his students who are 20, 21 haven't even heard of John Wayne. Now, to me, that my brain just goes, how can you not have heard of John Wayne? And I would argue that John Wayne is a bit more popularly known than Hedy Lamarr now, not then. I mean, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, yes, she was as big as anybody in the world, but her star has has fallen
Yeah.
away slightly.
Yeah.
But now, weirdly, if you search, that would come up there. The World War II Museum have had you there.
About her. There's so much about her now. People get very excited about her story, as well they should. At a certain point when no one was noticing it and she was seeing that it was being used everywhere, she's like, well, how does no one know? How does no one notice this? And finally they did. And then it took just a few key people to really bring her story out. The gentleman who put her up for the Electronic Frontier Foundation Award the first time, he had received it a few years prior, and he said, no, she really needs to get this. And that's really what kicked everything off. And her son, Anthony, has been really key. He's really dedicated a lot of his time to getting his mother's story out. And, as an homage to his mother, but also as an important piece of history of how important her work and her contribution has been. And, like I said, apparently the patent is now valued at $30 billion. But I think now that going back and reading some of Richard's book, it's more that it's worth $30 billion a year, but that's actually an underestimate, and it could be 200 some billion dollars a year that this patent is worth. And they gave it away, and everyone is benefiting from it in terms of our technology. And so many businesses are benefiting from it financially. And but that the reason that she did it was to save lives and to defeat the Axis forces and Hitler.
That's a very good point to remind ourselves, is that her motivation was to for the war effort. And what I'm finding is there's a paradoxical nature to her story now, in that there is this incredible success, there is this incredible invention, but as we've acknowledged, it wasn't adopted immediately. It was 2 decades before it was adopted, and so she's both inspirational, but she's also a reminder of how different the world was back then, and how the misogyny, the sexism, and not just. I'm sure if a Hollywood actor had been in with an invention, he would have been judged in a negative way as well as a female. It's because of the profession as well. Because
I don't know. Even if she was a man, it might have been different. Even if she was a male Hollywood star, because look at Clark Gable, look at Jimmy Stewart.
True. They were able to do more, but there would still have been a thing. He's only an actor. Stick to doing what you do.
Yeah, there would have been that, but it would have been. I think it would have been a bit different if she.
Yeah, of course. I'm not saying it would have been. I'm just saying it would have. She had the worst of everything. She was beautiful. She was a female. She was foreign as well. We mustn't forget the fact she was foreign. If she'd been born in Nebraska or something, it might have given her an advantage, because there was that suspicion of foreign technology. So it's this paradoxical nature that she's both inspiration but a reminder of how restrained and constrained that era was, and that she couldn't really fulfill everything that she could have done.
And also sort of to that thought, I think it's tragic. Some people are fascinated. They think, oh, she was a spy. But one, I found no evidence of that. And two, I believe that was a misplaced misogynistic notion that got out there in the world, that it couldn't have come from her. She must have stolen it from her husband and brought it here. And she had to have gotten it from someone else. So she's
someone smarter,
no, she took what they were doing. She made it better than they could. And if her husband, Fritz Mandel, or Hitler or anyone there had known about this, wouldn't they have used it?
Exactly.
They have done something with it. They didn't have it because she made it after she got here. So
this is very much like when I've had Kate Vigers on recently talking about the women SOE agents in World War II, and how when she's researching the files of the National Archives, the reports by these instructors saying, oh, a pretty little thing, this lady, it's surprising she could, you have to deal with the fact that there's this judgmental attitude of men towards women back then that oh, I'm surprised she can actually run fast. There's lots of that kind of stuff to deal with there. So I can understand why there's, well, how could this pretty woman possibly have come up with something that could have made torpedoes work better? It's logical. So, but the other thing I wanted to discuss with you, because now the story is out there, and I say it on these shows that when I do my prep for the shows, I try and find good history, but I try and find crap history as well to find out what's going around there on the internet. And now there are some of these kind of Hedy Lamarr won the war for us kind of articles now, which have taken what she did to a slightly exaggerated level. It's okay. No, she didn't. It's like, let's keep it within the realms of what she achieved. She doesn't need anything added to it to make it more spectacular. She just understand what she did. So are you finding now, in the 4.5 years you've been doing the show, as a story is a bit better known, people coming up to you and saying, I heard she did this as well, I like the spy thing. Is there kind of a counter spy to it?
Some people were just so intrigued by that. Oh, she was, and I just was like, no, I can't. That's not what happened. I haven't been hearing that as much recently. Yeah, I do see accounts sometimes that say, that I guess assume that it was used during the war. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I mean, I think it definitely would have affected the way the war went, and would have definitely been an asset to the Allied forces. But yeah, for anyone to assert that it was used during the war and help us win the war is unfortunately untrue. So, but that was the intention, that was the inspiration for creating it. And at least it was employed during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
And using that technology is part of why that did not escalate, and it, a lot of people would have died in that if it had gotten worse. But Khrushchev pulled out, and then it was I mean, we're still dealing with the fallout of it, but it didn't result in a lot of lives lost. And so in that instance, it did do what she wanted it to do.
And we have to, in a kind of a geeky World War II technological kind of way, there are the problem with the American and British and Canadian and even German and Japanese governments then is they've already committed lots of money to certain things, and something new, you've got to divert funds or scientists or production or resources from one bit of technology. So when a country commits to something they're working on, that becomes the thing they work on until it either succeeds or it becomes unworkable. I mean, there isn't unlimited money to throw at every single invention that comes their way, because I'm sure lots of people are throwing ideas at the US Navy and the British Royal Air Force during the war, saying this will do this and this will do, and they all need lots of money. They all need lots of extra additional research, and there's only so much money in the coffers in wartime to invest in these new things. So they kind of stick with the programs that they believe are heading them in the right direction. But I think, sorry.
I was going to say even the scientist who was handed the patent to use for developing the sonobuoy just at first would have thought, oh, well, this must have been developed by somebody who was, under contract, and they developed it, and of course the Navy owned it because of that. But it was something that was given to them. But yeah, I mean, where resources are put, I mean, it is a lot of what gets used and what doesn't. And so unfortunately it just sort of got stamped in the wrong light, that it was ahead of its time. So
that came up in the sidebar, people saying it was a bit too advanced for where the US Navy was at that time, and it had to the US Navy had to catch up with Hedy Lamarr's thinking, which in some ways is an incredible compliment to her brilliance, that she had to wait for an entire nation's military to catch up.
Couldn't understand how to implement it, and other technologies had to come up to speed with it, because she was then, and a lot of her life, always way ahead of time, including, I mean, she was a bit reclusive, more than a bit reclusive in her later life, but being known as the most beautiful woman in the world, she part of inventing. She would be like, oh, if you just tuck right here or whatnot. And so she invented a lot of surgical procedures that she had. But I think, people say they didn't go well, but I think that we just weren't used to seeing that look. Now you can see a woman say, oh, she looks good. I think she had some work done, but she looks good. But we're not used to seeing that. And so, just society it can be very cruel when they want you to look the same way you did when you were 20.
Yeah, and that's a terrible, it's a great label to get the most beautiful woman in the world, but the only way to come down from that is to go down, isn't it? Because age happens to every one of us, and you're put on a pedestal there, and it's like, well, okay, someone's going to knock you off that position because you can't stay there forever.
Right.
It's a horrible title to have.
And it's better to live than to die young and be, Marilyn.
Yeah, and she did live a long life. So I want to kind of end with your thoughts really about what you do going around the world, bringing this show about science, history, and glamour to all these different people. Because whether you've got any kind of advice for people like myself about how to bring World War II and bring subjects to a wider audience, because that's the eternal problem that us World War II podcasters have, is that we're preaching to the choir. Essentially, it's the same kind of people. I like tanks, I like aircraft, I'm going to hop on this channel there. And also, why do you think it's important for a wider variety of people to understand history and understand science? It's two questions really, or just your thoughts generally about that.
That's a lot. So in terms of understanding history, it's very important. We get complacent and we forget things that happened, like the Spanish flu, which is a good thing to understand for what we're going through now and to prepare for the future. And also understanding what has led to conflicts. Yes, I'm finally reading these things. I wish someone would have taken a closer look at the patent 1942, Scott. Definitely.
It's just, because what you were saying about inspiring people and taking this story, because we are getting more women involved in military history, but they have to, be allowed in by the gatekeepers, and that's difficult. Right. And the same with science as well. It's perhaps science is moving a little bit further ahead than the military history world, but it's important that I think that we leave this with the fact that Hedy is someone who we can be inspired by for multiple reasons. We can look at her acting career, we can look at her inventions and her survivor's spirit, the fact she lived a long time and things didn't always go for her. 6 marriages. It's that okay, well, I'll get one right eventually attitude. That there's always improvement. You can always make things better, and I think that's what she can leave us. But it must be heartening for you when you have these young people in South Africa coming away saying that's inspired me, that anyone can get into science in the same way like anyone can get into military history. There shouldn't be boundaries and restrictions. Anybody can talk about World War II. Anybody can talk about science.
Yeah. So obviously, like I said, we were talking about that understanding history is important. So we don't get ourselves into wars as easily, and we can figure out how to deal with things more peacefully and such. That's why it's really important to understand all of the conflicts that we've been involved in the history before the United States even existed. Her story has made the pieces of me make sense in order of putting these things together. My love of science, my love of theater, creating something new. And in that way, I can use her story to inspire young people. I love to talk to students and all audiences to encourage everyone to really consider those things that are most important to them, that the things that make their heart sing, that they're most passionate about, to spend their lives doing those things. So that's really wonderful. It's amazing how her story speaks to all these different countries that I've been to and different cultures, and people who would have never heard her name before they walk into the theater, and people who know a lot about her as well can get a lot out of the story. So, and even I've even done it with super titles in Italian when I was in Rome, so that people who don't know English as well can also enjoy it, and especially, say, South Africa is working to become a science and technology leader. They have a lot of science centers, a lot of science programs. There's the South African National Space Agency and the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement and the National Research Foundation. And so I've gotten to work with a lot of organizations there that are working to encourage young people in science, especially young women.
And you said an Ireland as well, because you've toured in Ireland, haven't you? You said
in Ireland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ireland is a big hub of technology now.
Exactly.
Setting up their IT and
yeah.
So that's another thing to encourage people that, you know what, anyone can come into this field. You don't have to come from a certain class, gender, background. It's if you've got an idea, come forward. That's, I think, the biggest inspiration.
So I've done, 4 tours in Ireland, including Inspire Fest, which I think it's now called Future Human, but it was founded by Ann O'D of Silicon Republic. And so she would tell people all the time about Hedy Lamarr. And then when we met, she definitely scheduled me. Let me read.
That's Tone, my friend in the Philippines. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here from the Philippines. Yeah, so her story is intriguing on so many levels around the world. So to people around the world. So in terms of your work and World War II history, well, I mean, learning about me and reaching out and saying, oh, this is a new way. You're already doing it.
I like to think so. Yeah, I mean, I do have enough, plenty of middle-aged guys wearing red trousers and tweed coming on my channel, but not just them. But I can't preclude them. But I just want to bring it from a variety of sources and backgrounds, because there's so many angles you can come at World War II, and sometimes when I say that I'm a World War II YouTuber to somebody, they kind of roll their eyes. I think all I'm talking about is tank guns all the time, and actually, I don't talk about tank guns that often. Really, it's more about people. Wars are won and fought by people, and it's the people who actually make the inventions, the people who do the dying, and the people who are the ones who suffer. And Hedy Lamarr is someone who went through World War II doing what she could, like most people did, and she used her talents in a way that most people couldn't, because we didn't have the intellect and we weren't as pretty as her. So she did things earning money for war bonds others couldn't do. She put technology forward that through no fault of her own wasn't adopted quick enough, but that wasn't her own fault. She gave it away to the country that was now her home, and that is an inspirational thing. So I think we'll kind of leave it there, really, because that's been brilliant. So I hope you eventually, Colin, my mate who's watching, he said that if you bring your show to Normandy, we'll all come and see you in Normandy. So that would be good. You could do one in France. I'll ask the World War II Museum to bring you over on one of their buses when they start again. They've got room for you in the back. They'll bring you over.
I would love to come to Normandy. Hedy would be very excited for that. And so I mean, reaching out to me is important. I mean, you can reach out to people who communicate this in other ways, like visual artists or, filmmakers you probably had, but
a little bit.
So thinking in different ways about finding other people who communicate it in new ways will also inform you in communicating it as well. So thinking outside the norm, this is what Hedy did. So that's sort of the message of the show is finding ways each day to make the world a better place. And your gift is sharing about World War II and having us learn about the history and helping that be a way to move forward in today in a more informed way. So you're doing important work.
Well, thank you. And it's the little community we've built up here, and we've got people watching from all over the world, and we all get on with each other, and we're coming from different backgrounds, and some of us are right wing and left wing and religious and non-religious and different colors. It doesn't matter. We've got a shared interest and understand what we can learn from the past. And I think that's ultimately the important thing. So, That's it. I think we'll call it a done. Let's remind people what we got coming up next week, and I'll come back and say goodbye to you in a second. So, folks, I've got the weekend off. Next week is Airborne Week. Some amazing shows coming your way. Greg Way has done about Operation Mercury, the German invasion of Crete on Monday. Kevin Mara, the legend, the photojournalist, is coming to talk about Rock Force, the 503rd PIR and Corregidor. We've got Pripyat coming back talking about Russian or Soviet air operations. We've got loads of things coming up next week. I've just put on YouTube today 20 shows, all for that's nearly all of September done. So we've got Holocaust Week, Battle of Britain Week, and Arnhem Week all coming up in September. So I haven't done the full descriptions yet, but they're up on YouTube, so you know what's coming up next month. As usual, don't forget to check us out on Patreon. The links to Heather's website, Facebook, Twitter is all in the description below. Go and check out what she's doing. Try and book one of the performances, go and see her shows, whatever. Find a venue near you to put her show on so you can bring Hedy Lamarr to your community. That's my advice there. So right now, it just remains me to say thank you very much for joining us, Heather Massie. It's been really good. I've learned a lot. My viewers learned a lot. So it's been brilliant. So
thank you.
Did you enjoy it?
Very much. And I think my father, who passed away in 2019, was a private pilot, and he owned every book on World War II aviation. So you're airborne.
Well, we've done a lot of stuff on bombers and air. He'd have loved that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been brilliant talking to you, and good luck with your show. Good luck with all your contribution you're doing to bringing science and World War II to communities, because in that sense, we're kind of kindred spirits. So again, and thank you for people like yourself responding to the weird World War II YouTuber guy and not just go, oh no.
You found me on Twitter. I hardly ever do Twitter, but Twitter.
It was thanks to my friends at World War II Museum. They put me onto you because they have your shows there, and then it all came together. So there we go. So
I just have to say how wonderful they are for anyone who is able, when it's safe, to travel to New Orleans, to go to the National World War II Museum. It is the #1 attraction in New Orleans. I think it's the #3 museum in the United States. It's really wonderful, and of course it started there because of the Higgins boats.
Indeed. No, it's a great museum. Absolutely.
Definitely that.
Brilliant. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Paul Woodad for World War II TV saying I will see you all next week for Airborne Week. Goodbye. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.
Bye.